Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Exponential Finance Podcast. Today, very excited to welcome Mirko Ross, who's the co-founder and CEO of asvin. Hey, Mirko, how are you?
Hi, thanks, and glad to be in the show.
So, Mirko, you're a cybersecurity expert, and you're on the road to building that for the Internet of Things as well. So that's two big topics already right there. Let's start with the cybersecurity landscape first. So what is your perspective on where we are in the current environment, where the news still seems to be that where anybody gets hacked any day and there's basically no security?
I think it's always a question like, when do we feel security? And we feel security normally not if we are secure, we feel insecurity. And what we see is, of course, daily we see data breaches now every day. We see ransomware attacks everywhere. We see DDoS attacks tearing down servers and networks. I mean, obviously, there seems to be a lot of stuff going out there in the cybersecurity space, particularly for the Internet of Things. To be honest, cybersecurity and Internet of Things already today is a mess. If we predict maybe we have 30 billion devices today, and we will have more than 100 billion devices the next 5 years, we're starting from a mess. Where do we go? To more mess.
The thing about the Internet of Things is we've been hyping it for quite a while, but especially now that we're in the middle of the pandemic, I still need to order my groceries. So my fridge is not doing it for me just yet. Some of the promises that have been put out in the papers haven't come quite to fruition yet. So where are we on the Internet of Things hype cycle?
I think it's a question on where do we look into, what kind of industries. For example, if we look in the pharmacy industry and all this invention which needs to be done for the pandemic, fighting the virus and the pandemic, of course, we see a lot of connected industries. We see a lot of, as well, Internet of Things involved in terms of collecting data, sharing data, feeding the machine, learning algorithm, and so on. I think there's a lot of Internet of Things in behind. But this is not the Internet of Things in the fridge. It's the Internet of Things in the industry. And that's the difference, I think so.
So you would say that the path of adoption is through, let's say, the B2B side first before we get to the B2C or even C2C side?
The question is always, where do we see the biggest value streams, even in terms of emergency we have now? And then, of course, I think the industry is heavily in pain. You can't do remote maintenance, for example. How do you do a remote monitoring of, let's say, a shop floor, a manufacturing line and stuff like that? Of course, you need the Internet of Things because you need the data to get remote control or to get a picture on what's going on there and keep up business. And even like on the medical sector, of course, we have seen a lot of medical data coming from IoT devices, health devices, stuff like that. And of course, even it was tracking people in the pandemic, and we got a lot of data of how people are behaving in the pandemic. And even there had been predictions out there where you can see out of this data if people might in danger to get infected or keep the people the quarantine and stuff like that. There's, I think, a lot of Internet of Things even out there as well. But it's, again, not a fridge. It's not a fridge. I think you have to still order your stuff by yourself.
So you mentioned the shop floor, which I think is an interesting topic, especially if you compare German and Japanese industry, right? Where we've got many small, medium enterprises that carved out the niche and are like world-class manufacturer in that little niche. But they're also very traditional and they produce things, but they don't necessarily connect things. So is this pandemic now, as you said, driving them towards connecting things more because you actually need the remote access to the devices?
Definitely. We've seen really the pandemic is boosting this. Because let's say in the post-COVID world, in the machinery industry, people were traveling a lot. If there was a problem on a machine, people were traveling, I mean, even from Germany to Japan or from Japan to Germany, however, just to check if everybody is ready. Or if there will be a new machine deployed, the people were traveling to the place where the new machine will be deployed, doing the testing, stuff like that. Completely, because everything was locked down in the pandemic situation. For example, on deploying new machines, people had been totally relayed on sensor data out of the machine. If you do the test run, deploying a new machine, you can't invite your customer physically to the site, to the factory site. I mean, they had to do this remotely, virtually. And by that, they needed sensor data and data out of the machine. And immediately, they needed to connect the machine. Before pandemic area, there had been a lot of excuses where people were telling you, no, it's not possible to connect the machine. Now it was a completely need. I think the machines are now more and more connected. The data is available, and there will be no turning back.
That's a good point with the engineers. I remember from conversations 2 years ago, maybe the state of the art was that the engineer who came to the machine had a barcode or so, or a code they had to enter into the machine so you could recognize which engineer it actually was who made the changes. And that was like a great advancement. But still, you need to have the person physically on site to actually do it. So it's only like one step along that journey.
Yeah. And now, if we look into the future, if we think about, okay, what is the lessons learned for the industry? The lessons learned is being connected seems to be a stabilizing factor for your business. That's one lessons learned. As better you're connected, your business is maybe protected from this kind of events like a pandemic situation. So connection will be everywhere. I think the barriers have lowered for companies to be connected. The industrial Internet of Things is more seen now as a need than ever before. And then we have new technologies stepping in, like artificial intelligence, machine learning. If you want to benefit from machine learning, you need data. First, you need the data. Then you can go and think about machine learning. And where do you get the data? I mean, you get the data from the Internet of Things.
There's a huge spectrum of things. I mean, you talked about sensors. So we have machines. So we've got cars on the one hand. We've got like thousands of sensors inside of them. And then we've got small items that kind of stand by themselves, which is maybe just a couple of sensors in there. These stick to health, keep your pulse and your heart rate and so on. It's not that complicated. But across that spectrum from big machines and thousands of sensors to the small things and a few, where do you focus with asvin?
I mean, to be honest, we focus on both, because if you step in the Internet of Things, it's most times, I mean, you are not starting with a big sensor fleet or with a big fleet of IoT devices. Normally you start with, let's say, a couple of devices because you start your development, you start your piloting on a certain product. So it's a few of devices. But then if you bring this innovation or this development into the products, it turns out that you're stepping on many cases in a mass case where you need to support a fleet of devices. For example, just take small devices like smoke detectors. It's easily, you start in your development with 10, 100, 1,000. Then you go to the product rollout, and then you ship 100,000, 200,000, a million. I mean, these are immediately products which are going into the masses. And then you need to support a fleet of devices.
Continuing with that, again, you've got smoke detectors. What's the lifespan of a smoke detector? 10 years, 15 years maybe? You ultimately need to have access to it and update it from a security perspective. If you live just with the initial deployment, then at some point you might be compromised.
Yes, I mean, there are some interesting aspects on this issue. First of all, the question is, how secure is the product at the time of shipping? And then, of course, you see, well, because the security, the vulnerabilities are popping up because they're already there, but now someone has just found out that there is an exploit. So, of course, the devices are leaving the factory which are already vulnerable. So there's a high possibility that you need to fix this device because a certain vulnerability will be detected when the devices are already out in the field during their lifetime. And this could be easily from the moment the device is leaving the factory. And by that, maybe not already installed. It's just on the shelf somewhere in a store, and then it will be installed. So this is one possibility. The second one is the life cycle problem. We see that, let's say, not so much in the consumer space, because on the consumer space, we see that the life cycle of devices is rather short, 2 years, 3 years. But if we go to the industry space, or if we go to, let's say, smart building space, where the life cycle of a building itself is maybe 40 years, or the life cycle of a car is 20 years, now you're turning this into a smart product. The industry has no answer on how to maintain infrastructure in terms of cybersecurity longer than 5 years, to be honest. And now you're just bringing these devices into entities with a long life cycle. I bring in a smart blind and shutter system to a building. How long is the life cycle of a blind and shutter? 20 years? 25 years? Well, if it's smart, to be honest, the life cycle should be from a IoT perspective, cybersecurity perspective, maybe 5 years. But no one wants to replace his completely shutter system or blinds every 5 years. So obviously there's a problem.
How do you help solve this with asvin?
Well, there are two ideas. The first idea is, okay, we help them that the devices are getting updates. Because for many vendors, this is still a problem. How to distribute 100,000 devices secure with updates. So, and secure means that a botnet operator and a hacker can't compromise the files and change them and update the device in their own manner. This is one way where we support the companies. The second one is that we clearly can give a history of what kind of devices are running with what kind of software. And by that, we know what kind of devices out in the field for a certain vendor are running with what kind of vulnerabilities. And then a vendor can decide, for example, do I patch these devices? If it's not possible to patch them because the vulnerabilities may be hardware-based, they can do a decision towards the risk management. What does it mean? Like, do we put the device in a compartment? Do we separate it from networks because it's vulnerable? Or do we have to replace the hardware or certain hardware components to bring back security? And this kind of risk assessment is even one part of our solution. So you're getting a risk threat model out of the fleets, you're getting the analytics, and then you know what kind of devices need an action for updates towards cybersecurity. And the third is attack detection. What is a botnet operator doing? And normally he's patching devices because the device has a vulnerability. He knows about the vulnerability. He is going with his own software. He's injecting his own software to the device. And then normally he's fixing the vulnerability. Why? Because he don't want that other botnet operators will take over the device he just has captured. A botnet operator is a patch and update distribution network service. If you have a fleet of devices, it's not like immediately that all devices will be captured at the same time by a botnet. It's something like you see that it starts with one device on one country, and then it takes time, and then more and more devices will be flipped towards the botnets, and we can detect this. So we can see, well, look, some certain devices will be captured. We know this is an attack, and then we can help to develop the right counteraction.
Are there any famous IoT hacks that follow what you've just described?
Yes, there are many out there, and many will follow up. I think the most famous IoT hack ever was the Mirai botnet, which was in 2016. Wow, it's 4 years ago. And this was, let's say, the first proof of concept that you can build a rather powerful cyber weapon for rent based on IP cameras, which have been captured. Well, and the problem is that Mirai was something like a blueprint. There's a long story of the people who did this. By the way, for the people in the podcast know that this was not North Korea. It has been 2 hackers from the United States doing this. When everybody was looking into the cyber attack, they got a little bit afraid, and then they published their Mirai code on JIT just to protect themselves. Look, I've just downloaded from JIT. I'm not the initial publisher of the code and stuff like that. And by that, they made a blueprint. So many people have put these codes of Mirai and have built now their own botnets out of it. This year, we have seen as well the first time that machine learning is coming as well into the botnet space, and that new technologies towards distributed networks are coming as well to the botnets. Classically, a botnet is a rather hierarchical architecture where you have command and control servers and the zombie devices under the control of the servers. Now we have seen the first botnets which have been completely decentralized, which is rather interesting because fighting them is more difficult. Normally, you are looking for the command and control servers. If you have identified them, just take over the servers and you get control over the botnet. But if it's completely decentralized, how you want to get this under control as a counteraction?
So decentralized means in a peer-to-peer sense?
That means a peer-to-peer sense, yes. This is rather powerful. And then let's add something like AI on the edge, like the devices itself are getting more intelligence in terms of their behavior, how they behave, so that all the systems trying to identify if this is a misbehavior, getting more fooled. So there's a lot of things going out there where the botnet criminal industry is more creative, more agile than the defending industry.
That's probably true, right, for any of these cybersecurity things in a way. As part of your research and development effort, do you have a monitoring on what's going on in the dark web, like the tool sets that are commercially available essentially to start hacking IoT devices as well?
Well, it's not that we are doing this in an automated way. To be honest, our roots are as well from the hacker space. I mean, my origin, I did my first hacks when I was 15 years old or something like that, but I turned aside, let's say, from the dark side to the bright side. So I'm quite connected still to this place of hacker. Itself, the term hacker doesn't mean that this is a malicious hacker, but in the cybersecurity way, a lot of people are doing cybersecurity research as well in a positive way, like to find vulnerabilities to close them. I'm rather well connected to this space. So I know if something new is popping up, and I know where do we need to look from a researcher perspective to introduce new technologies or introduce new things to get a better protection of IoT devices.
And some of that might sound very esoteric to some of the listeners. It always comes back to, and I'll never forget this, like one of our first conversations, probably like 2 years ago, when the example you gave me was a conference room reservation system at one of your clients that basically had displays outside of each conference room that showed what the current meeting and the next meeting is. And so this is connected to an Exchange server somewhere, and you can basically use that as an entry point to get into the corporate network. And that was like eye-opening for me at that time.
I mean, this example is still valid today, because what is the main lessons of this example? That we have a lot of smart things inside the companies just for convenience, or let's say to optimize certain issues, like to optimize a conference room. So by that, you have this kind of smart signage systems which are outside a room. But the smart signage needs to be secured, and they are less secured because companies believe, well, the signage is inside my company. What can happen with this? Well, it's connected to your Exchange server, which seems to me a rather critical part of communication infrastructure. My question is to many people, look, if someone with a screwdriver enters your company and he's just removing the signage and he's putting it into his pocket and he's leaving your company with your smart signage system, in his laboratory, he can just extract the semiconductor where all the keys are stored for accessing your wireless LAN, your LAN, even like accessing your Exchange server. My question to them is, who will recognize in your company that the signage is missing first? Who will report to whom that the signage is missing? If someone is thinking, well, this is not regular, he will go maybe to the facility manager. And then the facility manager will first maybe he will ignore it, or he will try to find out what's going on there. Was this a regular way, or what's up with the signage? It's not only hours we will spend there in our organization. I think it's a couple of days or weeks. If this will pop up to a cybersecurity guy, like this will pop up really to the chief cybersecurity officer, look, there's a digital signage system missing, and we think, well, all the cryptographic keys to access our Exchange are on that. Come on, couple of weeks. And these are the real threats. It's like not only technology, the whole organization is not thinking about cybersecurity in these issues. And for digital signage, this is really evil. And you can take this example for a lot of smart things which are placed inside companies.
And it's getting more and more, right? If you think about whatever, digital whiteboards and conferencing systems.
Light bulbs, Wi-Fi connected light bulbs. I mean, who would recognize that a light bulb is missing? Often light bulbs are missing because they are going damaged. Who will recognize that a hacker has just put your light bulb into his pocket and he is extracting the Wi-Fi access keys from it?
Even without an Internet of Things, we already have a very unstable, easy to compromise environment, and the complexity of the environment increases exponentially by going like from the 30 billion to the 100 billion devices that you quoted. How can we possibly get back control over all of this?
Let me be evil. I think it's out of control, and we don't get back full control anymore. It's not possible because the threat landscape is exposing too much. So we need to rethink our strategies. We need to get that under control, which is possible to get under control. Let's keep devices secure in terms to fix and close vulnerabilities, one of our offer with our platform. Secondly, find out if something is going on which should not going on there. Third, is a device missing? Because that's what we see as well. We see if a connected device is missing on our platform. So in terms of the light bulb or the digital signage system, okay, we will see that this asset is no more available. Then you can take the right counteractions. You can inform the right people which are related to cybersecurity and say, well, have a look at this digital signage, and not by escalating this over the facility manager over weeks. And that's the way how we need to react. And as human factors are limited, we need a lot of automation in there to avoid false positive, false negative stuff. So there will be a lot of machine learning as well in the future included to that, to do the right escalation and the right choices.
So the baseline is really have proper hygiene, which is easy to say, but sometimes somehow very difficult to implement. But if you keep your operating system versions current, your patches current, you're already quite far ahead of the competition. And maybe it's not reaching perfection. It's like the old question of, well, you need to run faster than the next person, right? So the tiger comes and bites the last one. And if there are enough easier targets around, then at least you selfishly for your company, you're safe.
Even the types of attacks are rather different. Let's say there are this kind of easy attacks. I mean, many attackers are just doing this for money because this is criminal industries, like getting into your system over IoT device, unsecured IoT device, for example, to perform a ransomware attack. This is one possible threat. The second one is like capture your devices, even as well for money, like to mine cryptocurrencies or to perform denial of service attacks with your devices. You can rent this attack machine to people who want to perform. So this is all about money. Like one part of the criminal industry is about money. And I think you can really protect you very well by just keeping your devices on a proper level to prevent from these attacks. And the second, what we see is, of course, the more advanced attacks, which are towards companies to compromise companies in terms of accessing intellectual properties, access to knowledge bases, data, whatever, or for sabotage, which is another type of attack. But you should also be aware that IoT devices are a perfect entry point for these attackers. Keeping your device healthy, I think, is a good strategy.
Coming back to the company once more to round it out. So we talked about the growth in this space. The growth is there. How are you looking to participate in that, even maybe beyond your fair share of the market? But what's your going to market strategy, basically?
We are a rather young company. Like the team has been formed 2 years ago around the main ideas of the product and even how we see like the market will go, or let's say the architectures will go. And now since 1 year, we have the basic architecture and technology of our platform up and running. And we have done several pilots in industry. By the end of the year, we will open our platform and our tools to a wider user audience, because currently we're doing this with our pilot customers. The solution is a global offer. And we are already, if you see what kind of people are downloading our white papers, then it's already a global topic. We have raised a lot of awareness, a lot of awards. All the large consultant companies have us on our watch list and stuff like that. So I think this would be rather exciting to see who is really then using the public version of our platform. We did really large piloting projects together with customers from the industry. So there's a high maturity level out there.
In the overall German digitization landscape, there are different centers regionally for different sectors. And so is IoT something that's explicitly on the digitalization agenda for the German government?
Short answer is yes. The term Industry 4.0, I think the term was a German invention, I believe so, because this was a big German government program trying to force industry towards digitalization. So yes, there are still a lot of programs out there as an industrial company where you can step in. We are involved as well on some of them, even on a European level. If you don't take Germany, if you take Europe as an economic area, there's a lot of movement inside Europe's R&D movements and things out there, initiatives out there which are forcing towards IoT. We're luckily in a lot of them part of it.
Good. Any final comments to round it out here?
We were talking about how do we connect blockchain to IoT? This is a fascinating topic to me because almost my customers even don't know what it's blockchain. For them, it's all like magic, whatever. It's an abstract term. But I had a feeling, for example, we are using blockchain, but I don't need to tell any people towards my customers, why do we use Ethereum and on what type of smart contracts we are rolling out? Because all what they need to understand that this technology is a part of a rather decentralized architecture, which is important because it makes it more stable towards attackers. So decentralization is a topic, getting more independent devices on the edge, because I think a lot of things will be happening now from the edge. If we see like the first everybody was moving to the cloud, now I see it's turning back to the edge, which means cloud edge will be the future, something like independent IoT devices taking decisions, doing stuff, and then we see cloud service stepping in. A lot of things will be done between IoT devices in the future. Discussing what kind of device will talk with other devices. Take autonomous driving, for example, in the city. Which car is doing communication with other cars and on what kind of level and trust? And security, of course, will be a core asset in terms of trust. If I share my information with you, traffic system, I'm a car, I will share my information with you only if I can trust you in terms of security, because otherwise I will not go into a connection with you because you will compromise me. Because to be honest, this traffic signal is part of a botnet. So a lot of things have relations to blockchain there. Even like, can I get my update from another IoT device and do the device paying themselves in certain ways of coins and stuff like that? And this is to me rather fascinating because talking with customers about this is rather difficult because they don't understand it and they don't need it currently for their current business. But we need it for the future and to make the right decisions even for the technologies we want to set our energy in the future. So that's a good topic, I think so.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting from a FinTech perspective. At the current time, we're talking a lot about cashless payments. So we're moving from physical cash to cashless, but it's still how is the human going to execute the payments? And as you get all these devices and you get the self-driving cars, which is still like a rather big unit, but you would think that at some point in the future, the volume of machine-to-machine payments will exceed the volume of human-to-machine payments or human-to-human payments. If the self-driving cars needs to insure itself and it needs to go to the gas station and refuel and it needs to pay the toll for the motorway, this is all going to be automated and the volume of that will be just so much bigger and it might be micropayments, but there's a lot coming into actually coming back to what you refer to as trust, to be sure that the entity that you actually pay to is the authentic entity and it's a real payment you're making. That takes a lot and we haven't figured it all out how to keep identity or manage identity for humans. I think there are a few countries who may be ahead in that, but to reliably identify identity for an IoT device, we're like Stone Age at the moment, I would say.
Yes, and just a sneak preview, we have a large research on this going on, how to bring unclonable identities into IoT devices and a concept which is called disposable identities, because we believe identity is something rather valuable. You should not share your identity with untrusted partners. But sometimes you need to share an identity because even you want to get into an interconnection with an untrusted partner. But why to waste your high valuable ID for that? So there are a lot of interesting topics out there. And I think we need visionary people out there who are thinking about this, even if industry doesn't need it now and even not now in the Corona times and stuff like that. But we need it definitively the next 5 years and 10 years. In 20 years, it will be commodity. Yes, there is a lot of fantastic stuff that needed to be done. And blockchain is still a rather good technology to solve a lot of these problems.
I mean, there's probably at least two aspects to it, right? One is we talked about all the data that's generated by these devices and can then also be reliably authenticated on the blockchain with the hash. The other is the mechanism to keep track of all the devices that you have in your monitoring console and what version of the asvin software they're running. And when you update them, how do they actually pay for the updates, etc. So there's that transactional component, which might be the second one. And
I think we can talk many hours, but maybe people are getting bored.
People are still worried about security of their PC and getting hacked in their traditional networks. Yeah. They haven't started worrying about their conference room electronic signage yet, but maybe we get them thinking a bit on that.
Yeah, that's a question of awareness, and awareness will change in terms of if you're a victim of it, you're aware. Unfortunately, that's the way how cybersecurity works.
Thanks very much, Mirko. Good luck with the runway towards the end of the year, and then the public release will be very exciting to watch that.
Thanks. It was a pleasure to be in your show. Thank you very much.